And it made me realize that once I had proof that somebody would actually support at that level, I started rethinking what I would do in the future. And my experience has been so good with this serialization that now I'm just baking this into my book launch plan for every fiction book, maybe nonfiction, who knows, but every fiction book I write now is going to go through this. And I started thinking about, well, what if maybe $100 isn't the top? Maybe it's $150, but for people subscribing at that level, they get a 1-hour virtual book club, which could be just the two of us chatting, or it could be them inviting their friends into a Zoom. Or, maybe I think that I added a signed print copy retrospectively when I realized somebody was going to be doing this.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 484 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Matty Dalrymple, a mystery and crime writer, member of the International Thriller Writers and Sisters of Crime. In addition to being a writer, Matty also podcasts, writes, speaks, and consults on the writing craft and on the publishing voyage as the Indy Author. And that's Indy with a Y. And she is a partner member of the Alliance of Independent Authors. Now, Matty's been on this podcast several times before, and in this episode, we're talking about something she's recently done, which is she's decided to release her latest novel first as a Substack serialized story. And it's not just a serialized story, as you'll find out, but it's some of the intricate additional bells and whistles that I got really excited about. And that interview is coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsors. This episode is sponsored in part by my affiliate link to manuscriptreport.com. What I love about this site is it is a marketing tool that I can leverage to get insightful information about my manuscript. The way it works is you upload your PDF of your manuscript to Manuscript Report, and within roughly half an hour, you get about a 30-odd page report back that has done an analytical view of your book. It will pull out tropes, it will pull out themes, it will pull out various reading audiences, some demographics about them, and a list of comp authors and titles telling you not only how your book is similar to those comp authors and titles, which is a very important element, especially when you're wanting to pitch your book to not just to readers, but to bookstores and libraries. It also tells you how your book is different or unique from those comp authors and titles. It will list out marketing copy that can be used for generating press releases, even the sales blurbs for the back of your book. There's usually something insightful to find within manuscriptreport.com, and I've used it for several of my self-published books as well as my traditionally published books to try and pull out some of these insightful nuggets that we sometimes just can't see. Just like working with an editor helps you find elements in your manuscript that you just can't see. It's that additional set of eyes coming into your manuscript and helping you with marketing content. And if you want to check out how you might be able to leverage that in your own author journey, you can use my affiliate code, MARK10, MARK10, and get 10% off at manuscriptreport.com. Before we get to comment from recent episodes, and there's lots to dig through, I would love to welcome new patrons to the podcast in the last few weeks. I would like to welcome Suzanne Grosser, Thomas Eastman, and Yvonne Kiljorian. welcome all three of you to the team of the patrons of the Stark Reflection podcast at Stark Reflections. No, it's not Stark Reflections, at patreon.com/Stark Reflections. Yeah, that's where it is. Names will be listed with the Hall of Fame of patrons over at Stark Reflections. Thank you guys for joining. I've sent you messages to confirm I have links to your proper websites and to make sure you have access to the additional bonus content. Now, speaking of additional bonus content, patrons should know, including Suzanne, Thomas, and Yvonne, that you should have received already a note of two things that I posted to the feed this week, in addition to some of the backlog of articles from Substack that I'm pushing out through, so patrons will always have access to those. But when Matty and I finished this interview, I wanted to tell her some things that she had made me think about. She had inspired in me, and as we started talking, Matty says, "Well, why don't you just turn on the microphone when we record this?" And I'm like, whoa, perfect bonus content. So not only will you get a reflection at the end of this interview, but my patrons, of course, will get that reflection of Matty and I right off the cuff as we finished the interview, just turned it back on. So there's a video there, but also it's in the RSS feed for audio for patrons only. So thank you guys, and thank you everyone for your patronage of the show. It really does help. Not just financially, it's helpful, but it's emotionally supportive as well. And you can become a patron and get access to content like that for as little as $1 a month. And I should say, I have already reached out to the patron who randomly was selected, and I didn't even ask patrons to enter a form to indicate that they wanted it. I just randomly put all active patrons in and randomly generated a winner and reached out to contact them. I figured it's easier for me to just randomly generate that for people who are already patrons. They've already done the work of being patrons, and if they're not interested in it, then I just pick another name and move on. So I have picked somebody, and that book is it was a book, by the way, that I mentioned in episode 482, where I interviewed Paul Austin Ardoin about his new book, outlining for pantsers, basically. And what I did want to offer is his previous book, which he'd been on the podcast before, From 0 to 4 Figures. And I thought that would be a helpful one to support Paul, as well as to support my listeners, and of course a surprise for my patrons, and of course what I am doing with the prize. And I have, by the way, since I'm talking about it, I've contacted the patron who's won, and I've already contacted the randomly selected folks, the 3 folks who have also won a copy. And I've reached out to say, hey, is there a local bookstore in your neighborhood that I can special order this book from, so we can support the bookstore, support Paul, and support you, and also give you an excuse to go talk to the bookstore. Because if you're going in to pick up this book for writers that was special ordered from you, you can kind of say, oh yeah, it was part of this podcast of Listen to Your Stark Reflections, and the host is really keen on wanting to support bookstores, and I'm a local author, blah 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 blah. So suddenly, without you trying to pitch your book to them, it's an icebreaker. I was going to say an ice opener. It's an icebreaker. It's like an opening conversation that's not all salesy. It's just kind of, oh, you're a writer? What do you write? Right? So it opens up that conversation. And that's one of the reasons I want to do it. I want to do it not just to support Paul, not just to support your local bookstore, but also to give you an opportunity to connect with them. So I have reached out to folks getting details about where I can order the book directly from their local bookstore, ideally, so I can help you with that relationship. It's all part of that, like long-term relationship building and growing. And anyways, so thank you everyone for and I'll get to the comments later, but thank you again for all the patrons as well. Okay, this little segment was not meant to be so long, but I guess I blended a little bit of this one into the next one. So I'm going to play bumper and do the next one, which is comments from recent episodes. Okay, comments from recent episodes. For episode 483, Tina McFarland said, Thanks for such a great interview. And that was an interview. I should pause to mention that was an episode on author branding with Jessica Sorrentino. Thanks for the great interview. It will definitely help me organize my brand, which still feels weird to say, as I get ready to publish. Thank you for that, Tina. And I got my fingers and toes and eyes crossed for you as you're getting ready to publish and organize your brand, your author brand. For that episode as well on starkreflections.ca, Edwin Downward said, "For whatever reason, this episode makes me think why I finally chose to go all in self-publishing. I always believed the publisher paid for everything from editing to marketing. When I got word from multiple publishers that my novel wouldn't be ready until I had gone for a professional editing, my paraphrase, my business brain told me I had become the publisher. From my perspective, having to engage someone like your guest to help on the marketing level falls under the same equation I faced all those years ago." And thank you for that, Edwin. Yeah, that is so true. More and more of the costs of even the things that the publisher brought to you, which is the editing, are often being off-put. And I've been lucky, I suppose, in my own experience with publishers, is that for every traditional publisher I have worked with so far, and it is a great experience right now with Woolsack and Wynne for my forthcoming Ghost Stories of the Great Lakes, is the editing process has just been so magnificent and beautiful. Yeah, I turned in a decently polished manuscript, but the editor or editors who work with me on it from the publisher have helped me make it even better, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with them. But yeah, in some cases, there are places where you're like, no, it needs to be perfectly edited before you submit it. More of that work has been put onto the backs of authors. More of the marketing work has been put on to the backs of authors. And that is a reason why many people choose to go the self-publishing route. They're going to say, and I just saw recently, I should say, over on Facebook, a fellow author had said, well, I think it was Mel Power who had said this, and I just saw it in my feed. Now, I spend about $1,300 to $1,500 per book that I publish, and I think Mel was talking about folks who were complaining that you charge as much as $3.99 for a full-length novel. And he's like, well, guess what? It cost me $1,500 or $1,300 to publish this book. I'm only asking you for $4. And I'm going to add a caveat to that, is that most books published are not even going to bring in $1,000, maybe even $100, $500. So, there's several of my books that have not yet brought in $1,000. And so, that's the reality of publishing, is the expenditure often outweighs the income. But all that to be said is thank you for that comment, Edwin. It reminds me of all the additional costs and expenses involved, no matter how you publish. For episode 482, which was the interview with Paul Austin Ardoin, which was outlining for novelists who don't outline. And for that episode, Edwin Downward says, in the great plotter versus pantser debate, I've come to think of these as not distinct points on a chart, but the two ends of a spectrum, which, as a discovery writer, I'm free to move up and down on as the situation I'm presently facing dictates. These days I can go through reams of paper brainstorming my way through a question before discovering I have begun writing the scene I needed to get through, at which point I will go with the flow, guided by all the ideas I've covered during my brainstorming sessions. I don't know if this technique actually helps me write faster, but it certainly does away with a lot of the stress I once felt when the well went dry, or when the well was dry. My apologies. I get that. I do think that is a spectrum, and it's a great way to look at that. And as writers, we can be on different ends of the spectrum for different projects at different times, right? So you can feel like, oh, for this one I really need to do more outlining work, and for this other one I'm just happy to just jump right in both feet. So thank you for that comment. And D.S. Lang said, I love this discussion about discovery writing. I write historical mysteries, and I always know where I'm headed, but it doesn't always work out like I planned. Since learning to outline in grade school, I've been resistant. When I taught writing, I often suggested a bare bones approach to my students. I'll admit my bones are usually quite bare. Thanks for this podcast, Paul and Mark. So helpful. Thank you for that. Yes, I love that, and I love the. Come on, a play on words always goes right to my funny bone. No, I love that. So thank you so much. And Malcolm said, really enjoyed this episode. We, and by we, I mean me, typically dream of what life might be like if we had a bestseller. But the truth is, for most of us, earning four figures with our writing will make a huge difference in our lives. P.S. Thanks for sharing about Indy. I wake up every day grateful that I get another day with my 14-year-old border collie. P.P.S. Cool new office. Thank you for that, Malcolm. And yeah, really driving home that point, which I just made from a previous comment. But yeah, actually just getting to four figures with our writing can be a game changer, a life changer for an author. So important. And yay, I'm happy that you get another day with your 14-year-old border collie. Oh, little fur family members are the best, aren't they? And thanks. I'll try to post a picture of the new backdrop, full backdrop in this episode for starkreflections.ca. I did share that with patrons. I know you probably have already seen that, Malcolm. But also, I just want to say again, I'm not going to get to reading all of them because there's a lot of really long, phenomenal comments. So not just comments here at starkreflections.ca and on where this posts to my YouTube channel, comments via Spotify as well, and my Substack post, which I called "Lessons from That Furry Friend Underfoot," about the loss of our dog Indy. So I really, it means the world to me. I appreciate. Not just the kind words. There were so many compassionate words from so many of you, so thank you so much. But also how so many of you opened up and shared your own stories about those special fur family members, dogs, cats, other animals, who meant so much to you, who still mean so much to you. I really appreciate you opening up your hearts in such a vulnerable way. And it's a reminder of something I just messaged to Liz a few minutes ago. She's taken our cat Meredith, who's some issues with eating lately, and she's an older cat as well. So we've taken her to the vet, and she's in the room where we were last with Indy, and that kind of set her off, and that made her cry. And I texted, I said, "Oh, I should have gone with you." And she's like, "Well, what's the point? Both of us crying?" And kind of my response was, yeah, because sometimes sharing that grief with someone else who feels very similarly, either of the same instance or a similar instance, like somebody else, talking about the loss of their own pet or some other loss, sometimes that there's comfort in that shared grief. But anyways, I do want to thank you, because chances are you sharing those messages, other people read them, and maybe it helped them in something that they were going through. But as mentioned earlier, everyone who commented on episode 482 was assigned a number. So, a random number was assigned to you, and then I used random.org to select 3 winners for a chance to win Paul Ardouin's book From Zero to Four Figures. So congratulations to all the winners, and as well as the patron winner as well. And thank you everyone so much for your comments. I really love that engagement and that sense of community. And I want to try to figure out better ways to connect in that community sense. But that's it for the comment section. I'm going to roll a bumper and play a bit of a personal update. I'm going to play a bit of a personal update. I'm going to roll the bumper, and then I'm going to record a bit of a personal update, which you're probably going to be playing as you listen back to this. Yeah, that's how it works. My office is now close to being completely back to functional status. I'm still in the process of, I just, reset the wires and hung a monitor on the wall and stuff, but I will send a picture of the beautiful backdrop. Those shelves that Liz has built for me are absolutely gorgeous. The desk she has built for me is gorgeous. Now, I've already scattered it with a bunch of junk, and I promised Liz, I said, I will not I will do my very best to do my duty to God and the Queen, to obey the order of the Cub Scout pack. Anyway, so it just brought me right back to being a Cub Scout. But I will do my best to try to keep things in somewhat reasonable order. We'll see if that even holds true. But what I'll try to do is see if I'm not gonna have time to clean the desk off so I can take a picture. Screw that. I got too much work to do. But anyways, it is a gorgeous office. I'm absolutely loving it so much. And I was even able to incorporate the sign that used to be on the wall, which is the skull and crossbones, and the with the Danger Author at Work. I was able to incorporate that into the shelves themselves. It kind of covers up some of the books, but a lot of people, when I was in meetings and interviews and stuff like that, a lot of people commented on it. So I could not have it visible. It was just such a cool thing that Liz had put together for me, including, of course, the whole office that she's made. Just absolutely wonderful. In terms of writing, been getting more editing done on a book in hand. The second half of that book is with the editor now, and I'm still kind of tweaking some of the stuff at the end, some of the the case studies as well. And I'm so horrible at this, but I just keep wanting to add stuff to it. I'm gonna have to get to the point where I go, okay, it's done. It's not going to be perfect. Perfect is the enemy, of course, of done. But I have started on a couple short story weird things. I'm kind of jumping around in terms of my morning writing ritual now. I worked on an early chapter for my forthcoming novel, A Canadian Werewolf in London, Ontario. That felt really good. I have been working on a horror novella, which is, interestingly enough, because I've done this before, me expanding one of my short stories into something that somebody in the industry had indicated an interest in wanting to see. So maybe I'm halfway through, maybe a little bit more than halfway through that. I'm hoping to have that done in the next week or so I can show it to them and see if it's something that they would really like, in which case, obviously, I'll have to do a bit more work on it, but at least I'll have that raw draft ready to go. And I have already, of course, started scheming and planning for some other projects, some short stories, as well as some other longer length projects. It's always dangerous when I get into that in between projects, or I'm waiting on something. I know I'm going to be getting more edits back, the final round of edits on the Great Historic Ghost Stories of the Great Lakes book as well. And I'm continuing to do my bookings. And so October, with the release of that book and so many things going on, is going to be absolutely so insanely busy, but I'm so looking forward to it. Although I am looking forward to more summer, because the summer's practically gone. It feels like it's half over, but I'm a the summer is half full kind of person. And I recently also, personal-wise, I've talked about this a little bit. I've been trying to follow a diet. I've been using the app, what's it called? Lose It. I've been using the Lose It app, and I paid for a version of that so I can take pictures of food and stuff like that, and track almost every single calorie I take in. Even Liz and I pick a pea pod from the garden, and I eat a pea pod and I pause enter. It's like 1 calorie. It's like, but there's fiber and there's goodness there. But I want to track every single thing that I consume in order to do the math, because I have lost more than 25 pounds since November of 2025. Now, I wrote about that in an Instagram post earlier this week, because for the first time in at least a year, if not more, I've actually been able to run a full 5 kilometers without stopping. I did that on Monday. Late in the afternoon, I went and took a beautiful run. Well, my run wasn't so beautiful. I was taking a run, a shambling stumble, I should say, but through a beautiful wooded area right behind a gorgeous graveyard in our neighborhood. And it's just so lovely. I love trail running. It was just absolutely exquisite. And the run, which included probably about a kilometer or so run before I got to the trail, once I crossed the particular traffic, and then I was able to just kind of run the whole way. It was about a kilometer and then 4 kilometers of trail running. And then I walked, I've been doing this as my warm down, walking up and down the rows of the graveyard, and I actually broke into tears when I walked through a children's section of the graveyard, and I just was in that moment where it just hit me. And anyways, I was thinking a lot, as I often do when I walk through graveyards, about reflections and about lives and remembering people. And it was kind of funny. I got this inclination, a weird inclination that came with me, as I was going to go get some hand clippers, and I was just, I'm going to walk through here and I'm going to trim some of the graves that have not been tended to, because somebody isn't around any longer, perhaps to care for a grave. It harkens back to an old Mark Twain story that I wrote, and I did a nod to that Mark Twain story. It was called A Curious Dream, was the story, and my short story was called A Curious Nightmare, where I kind of took it a little further. He was making a social commentary about graveyards being neglected, and I wanted to take it a little bit more of a horrific place. But it's funny how I do love the memento mori, as Joe Penn loves her graveyards. I do love the graveyards for that aspect, but also there's another element to them, because this graveyard's right beside a beautiful wooded area in Waterloo, in our neighborhood, so close to get to, right? Like within a kilometer and a half, 2 kilometers of our house. And even the graveyard itself is, yes, I know it's, monuments and remembering those who are no longer with us, but they're beautiful and landscaped and picturesque, and there's trees and shrubberies and all kinds of beauty there. And I do know how good being close to nature is, just how much I need it. I mean, I just need, at the end of particularly long days where I'm doing a lot of meetings, I'm doing a lot of bestseller reporting and analytics for Drafted Digital, and connecting with potential partners and all the various things that I do related to helping with marketing and stuff like that, and my own writing and all the work I do in the same vein. Sometimes I just go, okay, you know what? I've been at this for 6 hours or 8 hours, actually, if you think about it, by 3 o'clock. I just need to get out, and I need to go for a run, or I need to go for a walk through the trees. But anyways, that's a long aside within a story to say that I did the first 5K run. Wow, that was a long aside. Woo-wee! Follow me. Where am I going next? I did my first 5K run in a long time, and it felt absolutely exquisite. So I went to repeat it again. It had been a rainy, stormy day, but there was a break, and I thought, I'll go for a run. And it did start to rain about half a kilometer in, and I was like, that's fine. It's light rain. It's been hot. This is fine. It's cool. It's refreshing. But then I realized, as I got to, I had to stop around 3 kilometers, because once I was about 2K in, the rain started getting heavier and heavier, and my shoes were soaked, and my clothes were soaked, and I realized I was carrying an additional 5 or 6 or 8 pounds of wet, with probably mostly my shoes were absorbed most of it, because I was wearing thin a shirt and shorts. But I just realized that additional weight was slowing me down. I was like, well, no wonder I couldn't run, because I was carrying all that additional weight. So now I'm able to run because I'm not as heavy as I was. And it dramatically reminded me of that in a very quick run. So I only did about 3.3K is what I ended up running that day, instead of the 5 I was intending for. And initially I was frustrated and disappointed. And then I wrote longer, almost as many words as you could put in an Instagram post about it. And then after I did that, I'm like, no, this is a longer Substack article. So I've been working on that for this coming Monday, to kind of expand that, to do the parallel between running and a writer's life. I do love those parallels, which I've done, of course, the parallel between the writer and the chipmunk, and what what Indy, my dog, taught me as a person and as a writer. So I do love writing those parallel pieces. So that'll be coming out also on Monday. But I thought I'd reflect a little bit about it here for you. But wow, this is a really long introduction, as usual. I guess I've just gotten used to those really long introductions. But I'm going to roll the bumper, and we're going to get a chance to listen to... Yeah, we're going to listen to it, because I haven't yet re-listened to it. This interview with Matty, talking about serialization and some really great some great content, some great logistics as well. And that's coming up right after this bumper. Hey, Matty, welcome back to the Stark Reflections podcast.
It is lovely to be here. It is always lovely to chat with you, Mark.
It is always great to have you back on the guest as a longtime recurring guest that my listeners are probably familiar with. But for those who are not familiar with Matty Dalrymple, the Indy author, what would be the elevator reminder, not the elevator pitch, but the elevator reminder as to who is Matty Dalrymple?
The elevator reminder is that I author the Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts in Lizzy Ballard Thrillers. And I also podcast, speak, write, and consult on the writing craft and the publishing voyage as the Indy author. And people can find me at mattydalrymple.com and theindyauthor.com if they want more information.
Beautiful. See, the doors just as we reached our floor. And on this floor, I introduce you to, well, how tall is this office building? How long has Matty Dalrymple been a writer? I mean, I think I know how long you've been working as a consultant, but you've been a writer for longer, right?
Yeah, I published my first book in 2013, and I put out my first podcast episode in 2016.
Cool. Very exciting.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of things across the industry as well, like work with the Alliance of Independent Authors and other platforms as well. And you're very well connected, obviously, with so many other notable folks within the space, like the Dale Robertses of the world and folks like that.
Yeah. It's nice having a podcast because you have an excuse to talk to all these great people.
Cool. But we're going to dig into a lot of times. I think almost every single time I've had you on the show, we've talked about nonfiction stuff that you've either co-authored with me or with Michael Laron or stuff that you've done on your own. But this time we're here specifically to talk about your fiction and something that you've been experimenting with. And what is it, 6 months now that you've been experimenting with the serialization?
No, not even that long. Specific to the topic of our conversation, it has been 52 days.
52 days, not that we're keeping track. Yeah.
No. And it will become clear in a moment why I can say that so specifically.
Oh, I think I know. But okay, so you've been experimenting with serialization. What prompted that?
Well, one of the things that prompted it is that if there's anyone here who normally listens to the Indy Author podcast, they're going to roll their eyes when I say this, but I discovered Substack and I was very excited by it. I think was led there by our mutual friend, Angelique Fawns, who has a very robust Substack presence, and she's taking advantage of a lot of the different opportunities it offers, like the opportunity to put out a podcast. I think that's actually why I first started using it, because I was spinning up my From Expertise to Authority platform. And in an interview that Angelique and I did, she mentioned this podcast option. I was like, oh, a podcast, very interesting. So again, that was for my nonfiction. And when I went over there, it was at a time when I was just getting really fed up with social media. I had pretty much withdrawn from any active involvement on social media almost entirely. And I really liked Substack because it was a much more thoughtful platform, much more interesting long form content. And I wanted to capitalize on it as much as I could. And at the time, I was finishing up my 7th Kinnear suspense novel. And I was looking for ways to get editorial input on it. And I think I had also started hearing about people serializing novels. I mean, not that it just happened, but it just finally hit my radar screen. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a really interesting way to get some early feedback on a novel.
Why was it Substack specifically? Is that because that's a platform that was already on your radar when you were looking at Substack and you thought, okay, now serialization on this platform I'm familiar with, or did they come at the same time?
I think they kind of came at the same time. It's sort of a combination, because I'm very much someone who does not like to use a lot of tools or be in a lot of places shallowly, although we can talk about an exception to that rule at some point if you'd like. But once I decide to use a platform or use a tool, I want to use it to the maximum extent possible. And so once I sort of discovered Substack, and actually I should back up a little bit and say that I realized that my initial impetus for going on Substack is that I do consulting for the from expertise to authority. That is mainly for nonfiction authors. And we talk about ways they can get word out about their work. And I talk about podcasting as a host or guest, which I have books on, one of which was co-authored with you. I talk about becoming a speaker, which I have a book about with Michael Ron. I would talk about co-authoring opportunities, which I also have a book about with Michael Iran. And it was great to have personal experience and have dived deeply into all these different topics. But inevitably, someone would ask me about publishing on platforms like Substack. And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't really know anything about that, but go ahead and do that. And I thought, I really need to have some personal experience. Like my goal was just to have personal experience and to be able to talk intelligently about these platforms with people. But then when I experimented with it, primarily first just in posting like the equivalent of blog posts, I really liked it. And that's what led me down, really diving into its details.
Cool. So I'm curious about, so in terms of the serialization, when the idea for serialization came up, that was with the latest novel? And is this a process where the book's already written and you're serializing it? Or are you releasing the book as you write it so people are getting a sneak peek? Because there's different ways you can approach it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I realized I didn't completely answer your question, and just the idea of when I saw the sort of more considered and less rage baity kind of environment that Substack encourages, it made me realize that this was a platform where this kind of approach, serialization, would work really nicely. And I had the whole book written before I started. I know there are
Okay.
plenty of people who publish things as they're writing, and they've had great luck with that. That would just make me crazy. And so the book was like 95% done in terms of it was as good as I could make it. And there were still a couple of things that I did want reader input on. I had one very trusted, wonderful advanced reader, Lisa Reagan, who is the author of the Detective Josie Quinn detective series, who is always gracious enough to read my books and always has great input, usually on like a high level, like like character arc issues or story arc
Right.
issues and things like that. So I'd incorporated all that, but I was really looking for an opportunity to get more granular input and on work that I had already put together. So yes, all the chapters were done by the time I started the serialization.
Okay. All right. And again, this was a not yet released title. It wasn't not
That's right.
something that had already been published and was available on any other platform.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Because one of the reasons that I wanted to use a serialization and get that reader input is I did want it to inform the final product. And I used that as part of my pitch. Like, did you ever want to get in on the creative process of writing a novel? And here's your opportunity. And what I found is that when you're putting out a chapter, a period, for me, it was a chapter a day. I advertised it as a chapter a day. It was ended up being about 45 chapters. And I had about a week of lead up to it, which is where I came up with the number of days that I've been doing this. And you can really get reader input that I don't think you can get any other way, because even when I would have my editor edit a book, what it usually was, and I've had several editors, and it's always like this: you get like the big editorial letter that's describing the high level things, and then you get like, oh, you spelled this word wrong on page 7, but you don't really get, and I can understand why you don't get that chapter by chapter view of like, oh, it's the end of chapter 7, and now I wonder what everybody's thinking, like, especially because this is a mystery. And it was the only way I found that I could get like, what does everybody think now? Like, who do you think did it now? Who do you think didn't do it now? What are you suspicious about?
Right.
And just having that opportunity to have somebody read a chapter, sit with it, and comment chapter by chapter, I just think it's very hard to get that kind of editorial input any other way.
So did you actually do that? Like as you were going, were you soliciting feedback from readers?
Yeah, in some cases, I solicited very specific feedback. So, as an example, and this was another thing that I think is hard to get any other way, because I write in a series, there's always the dilemma about how do you accommodate people who are new to this? They're entering the series at book 7, and
Yeah.
how do you accommodate people who are just came from book 6? And so for the early chapters, a lot of my questions were like, if you have read the previous Ann Kinnear books, like, did this feel ponderous to you? If you haven't, did it give you enough information? Is there a better way to handle that? I got really good input on that. In some cases, like one of the debates my editor and I have is how obvious should you be about things? And I as a reader am willing to sit with something and kind of see what happens. And I think his preference was you're creating a distraction by making the reader wait for the answer to it.
Right.
And so it was also really great to say, like, are you intrigued or annoyed by the things that aren't wrapped up in this chapter? And then in some cases, I didn't have a specific question about a chapter. I would just say, like, I'm curious to hear what you think about this. So I asked both the specific questions and just throwing it open for any comments people had.
Okay, so looking at the way Substack is set up, so you have your title and subtitle, and then you
Mhm.
have the text, the body text of the chapter. And then do you have like what, like a line that's like some sort of break that indicates it's the end of the chapter, and then these are the, hi, this is the author asking you
Yes.
questions. Like how did you handle that aspect of it? Was it like that visual break?
Yes, I did. And actually setting it up is if I were advising someone about this, one of my tips would be create a template. And my template that I stuck with through the whole time was title, no subtitle for these particular things.
Right.
I started out with a little note like, in this chapter, I'd really love it if you would pay attention to this. I would have a little
Oh,
image that was kind of like, it was just supposed to kind of provide some visual interest. But
right.
I would probably not do that again because I spent a freakish amount of time looking for pictures that would match the different
Oh, you added
chapters.
some visuals because that is always nice on Substack to break up the
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I would have for the chapters after the first 7 free ones, I would have a little teaser bit, and then I would put in a subscribe button, and then I would put in a paywall. So anyone could read up to the paywall, and they were incentivized to
Right.
subscribe when they got to that point to see the rest of the chapter. And then I would have the rest of the chapter that was available only to paid subscribers. And then I would have the divider, and then I would have the author's notes, which could be I'm interested to hear what you had to say about like how obvious or unobvious these characters' actions were. And sometimes I would just put in it's a story that takes place on a cruise ship, and I've gone on 2 cruises this year, and so I would say like the Compass Lounge in the story is actually the Passport Bar on the Celebrity Silhouette, and so I would share like little
Okay, insider tips. Yeah.
behind the scene insider tips in that end part, and then the people were commenting via the comments
Oh,
function.
I love that. I love that. That is such a cool way of doing it. So I've so many questions, follow-up questions, but I want to go back to the beginning. I think you'd mentioned 52 days or 52 and a half days or whatever it was you said. And you'd said you had done a lead up. So I'm curious about the from the point where chapter 1 arrived. Let's back ourselves back up. So obviously it was like what 8 or 9 days or so. You said a week roughly.
Yeah.
What was that process and like what did you post and how did you I guess how did you drive? You obviously have an existing reader base for a series. That's one way, but what did you specifically do on Substack?
Well, those early installments were me introducing the idea of serialization, me talking about why I was choosing to do that, me
Okay.
providing some background about the Ann Kinnear world for people who were new to it, just some logistical information about Substack and how it would work, what people would get for various levels of commitment. And I have to say that that was the part that was trickiest. That like managing the logistical part, like once it was going, it was fine.
Right.
But what I was expecting is that it would be kind of like Patreon in the sense that there would be a very clear, like, if you're a free subscriber, you get this. If you're a paid subscriber at this level, you get this. If you're a founding member, you get this. And honestly, there wasn't a way to do that. I just ended up creating that table like you would see if you went to Patreon and putting it as like an image in my frequently asked questions and my about posts. So
Okay.
people would see that. And then the other thing that was surprisingly, I did a lot of research and I could never figure out a way around this except for like a goofy way, is that because Substack is oriented primarily toward people who are putting out content regularly, you have the subscribe for $5 per month or $50 per year. Like there's
Yeah.
always the yearly option. But I knew that this was only going to run for less than 2 months. And I was plugging that to the people. I was saying you are never going to get charged for more than 2 months. If it's
Right.
$10 a month and you subscribe at that amount, you're never going to pay more than $20, which I thought was important because if I were a reader, I wouldn't want to have to try to like remember when to end my subscription when the thing was over.
Right. Right.
But then Substack still required me to provide a year long option.
Okay.
And so I chatted about this with ChatGPT a lot, and we landed on the solution of set it quite high. So it's kind of
Like ridiculously
clear,
high.
kind of what felt like ridiculously high. So we landed on $100. And
Okay.
I tried to put in, all the notes like, you're not going to get this for a year,
Yeah.
you probably want the monthly. But I did have one person who subscribed at $100. And I even followed up with her and I said, this isn't going to go on for a year, right? And she said, oh, well, I actually didn't realize that when I signed up, but I'm still okay. I'm going to stick with $100 contribution because she was having fun with the experience. And
Wow.
so that is one thing that I wish Substack natively handled better because it is
Right.
just very difficult to get that message out to everybody in a clear way unless the platform is helping you.
So this is a bit of an aside, but it's something I was just reading earlier today from an email that came from Monica Leonel, who's running a virtual summit.
Mhm.
And it was about how having the one funnel for authors, for readers. Not every reader's the same. Some people want the cheapest possible one. Some people want the print, but like the ebook really fast. Some people want the audiobook. Some people want the print book. Some people want the signed print book. Some people want the deluxe edition with the gold and the glitter and all the stuff. And that almost speaks to the fact that there's a reader who loves your stuff so much and is so enjoying this unique experience that it's very rare for readers to have, that they're like, yeah, that's worth $100. Because I mean, Matty, let's come back to your books in the end. This is the Ann Kinnear series, right?
Yep.
Sorry, just to stay on track. The average price of a full-length book in that series is what?
It's $6.99 for ebook and I think now $18.99 for print.
Okay, so here's somebody who knows that your books are $6.99 in ebook. This is a digital version they're reading, but it's a more
Yeah.
enhanced, obviously with more bells and whistles and stuff, which is kind of cool. But they're like, no, 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 I'm happy to pay $100 for this experience. Like that to me is just such a great sign, A, of two things. Different readers want different things, and readers who really like you, really like you. Sally Field, conjuring Sally Field there for a second.
Yeah. Yeah. And it made me realize that once I had proof that somebody would actually support at that level, I started rethinking what I would do in the future. And my experience has been so good with this serialization that now I'm just baking this into my book launch plan for every fiction book, maybe nonfiction, who knows,
Wow.
but every fiction book I write now is going to go through this. And I started thinking about, well, what if maybe $100 isn't the top? Maybe it's $150, but for people subscribing at that level, they get a 1 hour virtual book club, which could be just the two of us chatting, or it could be them inviting their
Right.
friends into a Zoom. Or, maybe I think that I added a signed print copy retrospectively when I realized somebody was going to be doing this because I thought, yeah, I kind of want to thank this person, beyond what
Oh,
I had
that's kind of
already.
cool. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
still good value for you, the author. They also have
Yes.
a unique item, which is kind of and again, like worst case scenario, 5,000 people order that, and you're like, oh darn, now I have to print 5,000
Yes,
copies and
that's the
sign them and
problem we
ship
would
them.
all love to have.
Darn, I'll have to do that now. That'd be a great problem to have, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
So, okay, So the logistics of this was you had the precursor for so many days of letting people know what was coming and stuff, and then ideally one of the learning just said is, yeah, build a template and
Yeah.
don't worry so much about the images because that probably slowed you down.
Yeah.
But then it started on let's say day one, and
Hmm.
then well, day one after the prelude. Day
Right.
one, the novelization started once a week, right?
Oh,
Once a
once a
day.
day.
Once a
Yeah.
day.
Once a
So it's
day.
days. So
Yep.
it's not like people had to wait a long time. It was like,
Right.
ooh, my morning coffee. I'm gonna get and read the next chapter, which is kind of
Exactly.
cool. I like that. Then you get to the final chapter, which has been published already, right?
Yeah. Just yesterday.
See,
Yesterday,
I'm
the
so
final.
glad I had to delay this interview because now I can get more insights into the full process of this. So it just finished yesterday. And when does the book actually release for the rest of the world? I mean, the poor saps who weren't lucky enough to be part of this great experience.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I should provide a clarification, which is that the last chapter dropped yesterday, but I still have, I think, like a week left. I could do a week's more posts and not have people charged for the extra month. So I have this very
Oh,
clear deadline in my mind about like, I want to give people the maximum value, but not risk
so
charging anyone for a
what are you
third
gonna
month.
fit in there actually in between like yesterday? Yesterday was the last chapter.
Yeah.
So what was today, and what do you have planned for the next week?
So there's going to be the title reveal, which will be, it will, I think this will be
Oh,
fun
they don't even
because
know what the title of this book
they don't know
is.
what the title is. Yeah,
Oh,
that's right.
wow.
I
It's
used
like
a
I'm
different,
enjoying this book by Matty Dalrymple. I don't know the name of it.
yeah, well,
You don't
I
remember?
called
No,
it,
I don't know the name of it. It doesn't have one yet.
that was a little confusing because I called the publication, on Substack, there's like your profile and then all the things
Yeah.
you have under it are publications or Substacks, I suppose. And I called this one At Sea. And then I spent like the first three posts assuring people that I wasn't actually planning to name the book At Sea.
Oh.
Um, but I was really on the fence. I'm still a little bit on the fence about the title, which is fun because today, the post that will go up today is here's what I think the title is, and here's the backstory, and here's where it came from. And all the Anne Kinnear novels and most of the short stories are based on Shakespeare quotes. And so here are some other things I considered. So I think today's is going to be a really fun one where people can actually weigh in on what they want the title to be.
Oh, see, I think at sea or not at sea would might be a riff on Shakespeare. Sorry. Come on. I
That will be
couldn't resist.
your special edition.
Special edition of my special dad humor Shakespeare brand.
Exactly.
So I
Um,
love that. So
yeah,
one of the other experiences is they're not just reading the novel, but they're getting to engage with you, the writer, and share their feedback along the way. So cool thing is there are readers who, when they pick up a thriller or mystery novel, they go to the back page and they want to see who did it first, and then they can then and only then can they read it. I don't think those people are pantsers if they're writers. Those are plotters
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
They need to know how it ends before they get through the gist of it. So it's a different experience. They can't do that. They can't flip. Well, I guess now if somebody signed up, they could jump ahead.
They could do
But for
that
the
now, yes.
live audience, there's the thrill of the liveness of it, I think, is there. They're providing you feedback, which is an amazing experience. But then they also get to provide feedback on the title. Is that gonna
Yeah.
you can do that with the cover as well?
Well, I do have the cover pretty much ready to go. And if we decided on a different
Yeah,
title,
sans title. Yeah.
I'd have to swap out the title on the cover. But that would be the second bonus would be the cover reveal.
Right.
A third bonus is going to be that as with, I mean, this is probably true of everyone who writes a mystery, but I had to come up with a very detailed backstory to help me keep all the logistics,
Right.
in my mind for writing the story. So it's like, when did this person recognize this? Like, what was this character's initial motivation? And so I said that if they wanted to see it, I would share my backstory chapter
Oh, cool.
that would, never be included in the book.
Right.
And then I think there's some other options, just like, I'm moving people now less, the subscribers from the individual articles. I'm trying to move everybody into chat so we can have more of an interactive conversation in the chat, in the Substack chat. And then on top of that, there could just be some other fun things like oh, here's a picture of when I was on this actual ship that this is based on,
Okay,
or
cool.
maybe like a deck plan of the actual ship saying, this is what's called this in the book. This is what's called this in the book.
Oh, I love that. That is really cool. Okay, and then so that you've got that extra week, but when is the book actually
Oh,
available, and where will it be available in like ebook and print and all that stuff?
so it will be available on all the regular platforms, all the wide platforms when that time comes. I hadn't committed to a time because it was really going to depend on what kind of input I got, throughout the book.
Right.
And fortunately, the input was pretty easy to incorporate. There wasn't
Okay.
any like, I don't believe that this person had the, motivation that would lead to this crime. So what I'm anticipating, although this is a little bit tricky because I could I could have it available on like September 1st, to put out on all
Oh,
the retail platforms. But I'm also going to be doing the same exercise, the serialization for my sixth Lizzy Ballard book. And that would start on September 1st.
oh,
Um,
okay.
so I'm almost thinking I should postpone the publication of the Ann Kinnear book so that it's not happening at exactly the same time as the
Right.
Lizzy book. I mean, as the Ann book. That I'm separating the Lizzy and Ann books. And then after that, I have two standalones that are at various levels of completeness. One
Right.
is like could be publishable as is. It's gone through my editor. It's gone through beta readers. It's like I
Right.
could hit publish tomorrow, but then that's going to be the third book that I serialize.
Right.
And then I have another standalone that's like 85%. And I think that's going to be more of setting an expectation with the subscribers saying, like, this is about 85%. So this is not going to be as polished as the previous
Right.
standalone. And I think that's the key. None of these are right or wrong in terms of the finishedness of the work, as long as you set the appropriate expectation with the readers.
I love that. And so I love the fact that, okay, so I have feedback from my readers, which does allow you the possibility or the option to make adjustments. It's almost like I guess in film they do screenings, they do test
Right.
screenings, and
Yes.
sometimes based on the test screenings, they will make changes to either the film itself. They will add a scene or they'll remove a scene because the audience didn't react the way they expected it. Or in some cases, and I know this was true for Die Hard, I believe, when it came out, they'll change the marketing based on what
Yeah.
the test audience is like. Oh, they really resonated with this. Let's add that to the official trailer or remove that other part. Um, so you gave yourself that wiggle room from day one, right, in your initial
Yes.
plan.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's one of those, I think clarity of communication is key. And so one of the things I also put in my descriptions of benefits is people at a certain level of support would receive the ebook when it was available. And I tried to be very clear that that
Yeah.
wasn't going to happen the day the campaign ended. It might happen
Right.
in a month, it might happen in 2 months.
Right. But they may even get it before anyone else gets access to it, which is kind of a perk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though
That
they've
could be.
already read the almost final draft with bells and whistles. So in terms of from the if I'm allowed to ask these questions, is in terms of, okay, when I release a book, it's 6.99 US ebook, and I get whatever. Has the money been satisfactory? And not just the money, because that's only one aspect of this experience. Has the experience of the engagement with the audience been, have they both been rewarding enough for you? I suggest, I believe, based on the fact that you're going to do it again, it either was, or it's a slow, long uphill climb.
Yeah. It has definitely been worthwhile, even though the number of followers was smaller than I had hoped. So I think some of this is on, I can chalk up to, I just have to think of different ways to market it, especially to my existing followers.
Right.
I was surprised at how few of my existing followers signed up for it and how many of people I didn't,
So new
I hadn't
people
new
signed up for
people.
it, not
Yeah,
not your existing base as much.
exactly. So
Okay.
one of the things I'd want to look at carefully for the next one is how can I change how I'm presenting this so it feels more appealing. The one another thing that I would say is I did this when I was still quite early in my Substack experience. And so there were certain things that, like, I just found out, sorry, Substack people, I just found out about notes. Like, I'm the only person who had discovered notes. And for other reasons, I was taking an online Substack for beginners course. And I was like, oh, that's what those things are. And so I was missing like whole categories of things I could have used to promote it more effectively on
Yeah, like an
Substack.
excerpt from a chapter, like, and you share that as a teaser, and yeah,
Exactly. So I definitely wasn't hitting I wasn't pulling all the levers I could have. And I knew that going in, like I knew this was an experimental thing. I think I was pretty pleased with what I landed on in terms of the finances, which is that everybody got the first 7 chapters for free, along with the author's notes for those chapters.
okay,
And then for $10 a month, they got access to all the chapters as they were published. They got an audio production of one of my short stories that is also set on a cruise ship. And they would get the ebook upon publication. And then for people who supported across both months of the campaign, those people would also get a mention in the supporter page in the book.
right,
So it would say, like, thank you to these people for supporting through the whole campaign. And they would also get a coupon for a discount on a print book, not a signed print book, but just a print book that they could use on Curios. And then for that annual $100 contribution, you would also get the signed print copy. And then I think the next time I would add this idea of maybe even bumping that annual fee up a little bit, but having it include this one-on-one
right, yeah.
virtual meeting. So I think that I like the approach I used, but I think that there's room for improving the results as a result of more information about how the platform works, among other things.
Oh, wow. So it sounds, you'd mentioned you already have plans that this is how you're going to release each new book, regardless of where if they've been finished or not, right? And you've got a few already either finished or close to.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever put up when I was saying like giving percentages like 85% there, that was more quality wise than quantity wise.
Gotcha.
So the whole book is there. But as an example, for one of those two standalones, I do believe that to make it a satisfying book, I would just need to beef up it's a tiny bit sketchy. I think it would end up being longer when I was done with it than
Right.
its current form. And so, but I still would never start this without having the whole story ready to go. That's just like past my risk tolerance. But I think that people who are
Yeah.
willing to do that, you can tap into a whole other group of people who are excited about like seeing this happen in real time, and you're giving them even more opportunity to be active participants in that creative process.
That is how Andy Weir initially wrote The Martian, right, on a blog.
Really
Yeah, it was rolled out as he was writing it, and people were giving him scientific advice, and he was going back and fixing the potato stuff and all the science stuff. But
interesting.
I did that in 2006, where I kind of knew where it was going to end, and I had no idea how I was going to get there. And people started following it, and I was making it up as I went along, which
Well, yeah, I want to hear more about that experience. Like, how did,
9 month experience. And I did incorporate them, not feedback, but they responded. It was a blog, and the story was this kid's blog. He thought he had a death curse in everyone he became close to. So he's diary entering on a blog, and people thought it was really a suicidal kid, and I'd have to break the fourth wall. And I did have a note saying this is fiction, but some people just thought it was a poor suicidal kid, and they were trying to help him. And I'd
wow.
message them and say this is fiction, and then they'd play along as if he were real. And
Oh,
those
that's,
comments helped inform what I was going to do next, because if they really liked something, I'd stretch it out a little. It's kind of
yeah.
like when you're doing improv with an audience, like, oh, they like this shtick. I'm going to do more of this shtick. Haha. I'll keep them going,
Yeah.
right? And I also incorporated their comments into the actual novel that was eventually traditionally published. I changed their names to fictional names, but I kept them consistent characters. I even got them to vote. I did very specifically break the fourth wall with a note that said, so and so in this character, he has to die. It's important this character dies because I need that to happen for something else that I knew was going to happen. But does he die a hero or a villain? Because I created a character only to kill him. I just like break this character. He's a thing, an element that had to be killed. And the cool thing is they voted, and then I wrote what they told me. Like, how is he going to die? Is he going to die as a bad guy or as a good guy? And I
That's
had
very cool.
like you do in a mystery, you plant enough seeds of doubt that he could be either. Kind of like when you think about Harry Potter, most people would know when you think about Alan Rickman's character, what's Snape.
Snape.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, it's forever Alan Rickman now because he's such a
Yeah.
brilliant actor. But
Yeah.
when you think of Snape, it's like, is Snape really evil? Or like you know what I mean? Like you have
Yeah.
these questions about Snape, which I thought were done brilliantly. And I use that as an example because I think most people are familiar, even if they haven't read
Yeah.
the novels, they've probably at least seen the movie or heard of it.
Well, I think that willingness to do that, to write it as you go. I mean, I think some people could say, "Oh, well, that's like a writer looking for help." But I actually think that that's a sign of like extra writing talent because you have to be fairly comfortable that you're going to be able to accommodate, maybe not exactly execute on, but accommodate the comments you're getting. You're braver than I am.
Well, again, this was 2006, and I'm still a pantser, but I was a lot more of a pantser back then because I'd never even collaborated with another author before, which requires actually knowing what you're doing ahead of time, as opposed to what I normally do. So and it was early days of blogging, like because I was blogging all the time, and so it
Yeah.
was like what you're doing with Substack. I was like, oh, let's experiment. Let's take the short story that I'd written and let's try to adapt it into something.
Yeah.
So I love this. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there something about the experience you had mentioned, like you didn't understand about notes and Substack, and obviously some of the logistics related to the annual that is not you can't turn it off with Substack. But is there something else about the experience that kind of either delighted you or surprised you that you had not been expecting?
Well, I think one sort of caution I would give people, and this was not, it didn't pan out in a bad way at all for me, but you're putting your stuff out there and you're asking for input, so you're going to get input. I think that you have to be someone who's like pretty comfortable with that concept. And I did have people who would say, oh, like this isn't quite working for me, or, I'm not quite understanding where you're going with this. But it was always done in a very, thoughtful, professional, positive way. So I did not have to deal with, trolls showing up and saying nasty things, in part because they would have to pay to do that. So that probably helped.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, they're already a little bit invested, right?
yeah, they're invested. I think the fact that you're like inviting them into your creative home, that hopefully creates a sense of them wanting to support you. But you do have to just face that, like, people are going to be criticizing your work, and so you have to be comfortable with that, and that if it becomes unprofessional or I don't even want to say uncomfortable because I think inevitably it's going to be somewhat uncomfortable. But if it becomes, actively negative, then I'm sure there are ways on Substack that you can, turn that person's subscription off and just refund their money or whatever that might be.
Right.
I think people just have to understand that going in and being willing to accept that input graciously. And my commitment going in and the commitment I stuck with was I was never going to argue back with someone. If someone said something and I was like, that's weird, I would just say, that's great information. Thank you for taking the time to leave that note. I would never say, well, you didn't really understand, like such and such, because obviously, if they didn't understand it, then other readers might not understand it either. So always just make sure that the interactions are positive and that you're willing to interact with them in a way that's going to encourage that.
So, Maddie, for anyone who is interested in checking out this serialized Substack novel, they don't have to wait day by day by day. They could actually, if they wanted to binge it, they could. Is it still available? Somebody can start it now?
It will be. So we're recording this sort of toward the end of July. By the end of July, this one will be wrapped up, and only people who have subscribed will be able to access the archived chapters that are out there. But there are going to be more coming up. And so if people want to follow me on Substack at Matty Dalrymple, then they will find out when those future serializations happen. And they will also find my new Substack platforms for the Indy Author and From Expertise to Authority.
Awesome. And they're all under at Matty Dalrymple, all under that one brand?
Yes,
Okay.
they are, which is a little weird. That's probably a whole other conversation to be had with an actual Substack expert, but
Well,
it is
we'll get there. But no, but that
it's
makes
a
it
weird
easier for
mishmash of
people.
things.
No, for people who know Matty Dalrymple as
Yeah.
the indie author, they're like, oh, cool, I can check out Matty's fiction now, right? It's easier for
Yes,
them to find it.
it is a benefit in that way. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. And where else can people find out more about Matty Dalrymple?
Well, they can find out more at mattydalrymple.com, and that's Matty with a Y and ATTY. And if they're interested in my nonfiction, including the books I've co-authored with you, Mark, they can find that at the indieauthor.com, and that's Indy with a Y.
Awesome. Thank you. And Matty, I never have to ask why I have you on the podcast because it's always a great pleasure. Thanks for hanging out with me today.
Thank you, Mark.
As usual, so many things to reflect on. And it was so cool that immediately after recording this, I wanted to reflect on stuff. And Matty and I did that. And as I mentioned, the video and audio for that are available over at patreon.com/Stark Reflections. But some additional reflections that I thought of as I was editing this and re-listening to our interview. The first one was something Matty had said early on in the interview, was maximizing the use of a tool. How if Matty is using a tool, if she's incorporating a tool into her world, she wants to take advantage of it. She wants to maximize the use of it. And I think that's such a phenomenal aspect. I love that aspect. I love that approach because this is, the underlying thing here is we have so many tools to use. I was approached by a company. I was offered a free license to a tool that looks like it is a phenomenal. This is another aside, but it looks like it's a phenomenal replacement for Word, Scrivener, and Vellum. And I want to test it out because I have some stuff I want to do. Now, I'm probably going to still continue to write in Word, and I've never really leveraged some of the tools from Scrivener that are good for outlining and stuff, but I could see where I might, especially in some nonfiction projects where that might come in handy. But I want to give it a shot specifically for formatting because even though Vellum is a phenomenal tool, I absolutely hate having to move crap onto a cloud, like in my Google Drive, and then pull it down on the Mac. I still, honestly, navigating my Mac is just a pain in the butt. So anyways, but there's this tool and there's like, when do I have time to play with it? And so when you adapt something new as an author, you're investing a significant amount of time. And I love that Matty's approach is very pragmatic, very practical, very structured, saying, okay, I'm going to start using this tool. I'm going to use it for as much as I can, which is phenomenal approach, as opposed to going, I'm going to use a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other thing as well. So that's something to consider. It's something I'm thinking about. So I'm learning. It's like, okay, how did Matty do that? How does she have the structure? And more importantly, I think, for me, is to find the discipline to actually leverage the tool to the maximum that you can. And I love that about her. I think one of the ways that you can do that with some of the tools you're using, are you using the things you're already paying for or have already paid for to their maximum capacity? And that's something that Matty inspires in me. And that's one of the things I'm reflecting on from this. The other one comes back to that $100 subscriber. So this was, based on the logistics, and this is not what Substack was built for, so Matty's kind of leveraging it in a different way, but then somebody paid $100, and how after Matty tried to, refund it or explain, listen, this is only going to be 2 months, etc., but how the reader was fine with that, and fine with supporting an author in a significantly higher value than, the typical $4.99 or $6.99 ebook that a lot of indie authors are all about all the time. And it reminded me, I mentioned this, but I want to talk about it in more detail. I mentioned this in the chat. something Monica Leonel shared, and it's in a Substack post. I'll include a link to that in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. But Monica had said that it's not every reader wants the same experience. Some are in it for the low cost, for the fastest way to consume the work. Some want a physical copy. Some even want a signed physical copy. Some want the beautiful and collectible options, the exquisite and exclusive. Others want behind-the-scene access. They want access to the writer. Matty talks about that as well. Some want to participate in the creation of, or at least feel to be part of the creation, which is where you get into crowdfunding and things like that. Matty even mentions listing, people get their names listed in the book. Some want to discuss the work with other readers. Others want every possible addition or bonus-related content to that book. And Monica's point was that not all readers should be funneled into the same $4.99 US dollar ebook buying experience. And Matty's experience here is another perfect example that there are different strokes for different folks, and offering those different layers. And I love how, based on that experience, Matty is going to adapt to what she offers. She's like, okay, well, obviously I'm going to send them a signed print copy of the book, or I want to see what else I can offer to, make it more worth their while, and maybe more people would be interested in those other elements. And that's the bigger reflection here from that, is as you're testing out platforms and tools and being inspired by Matty, for example, of the things you want to do. And again, that's one of the things Matty and I talked about in that bonus content. Was I thought, okay, I have like 3 different things I want to do with, fiction and nonfiction, based on what Matty's doing, because I think this could be intriguing. Now, the other questions are, how am I going to incorporate it into my Mark Leslie Lefebvre banner, which is, that one thing that I have where I have the Stark Reflections on writing and publishing the Substack articles, which are all just for writers. What can I start that's just for readers so I don't muddy the waters? Or do I care? Do I say, hey, if you want to check it out, it's here? But anyway, so all these ideas have come to play, and who knows when or if I'll have time to work on them. But I love how we can be inspired to try new things. We'll see if I end up trying the new things. But that is it for the reflections. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, one of the things you can do to help spread the love is to share this episode, or any episode that you found value in, with somebody else, with some other writer. That's not only helping me and Matty, it's helping you feel awesome about sharing something cool. And of course, it's helping that person that you shared this great interview with. You can do that with any episode. You can also leave reviews wherever you listen to podcasts, and also comments. I love comments on starkreflections.ca, and sometimes I even get those notifications for the comments on Spotify and YouTube and stuff like that. I love the comments because it is a reminder of the intricacies of the people behind the show. And if I go back to episode 482, where I was getting a lot of comments who people shared, their own reflections and memories of beloved pets, or furry family members, as I should say, because they own us. We don't really own them. And they own us for most of their entire lives. And there's something really beautiful and connecting when you guys share those comments. So thank you so much. My apologies for anyone who's I wasn't able to read full comments, or whose comments I wasn't able to read on the air, but I do appreciate those comments, and it means the world to me. You mean the world to me. Thank you so much for listening. So until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.